So everybody thinks that the elections are being stolen by flipping ballots. But I always tell people, it doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. So a lot of times people say, we want to do a recount. We want to catch the fraud. Doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. What matters is how many of the bills are counterfeit. And what's happening is all these ballots are coming into your elections. You're counting them by machine. You could count them by hand counting. Doesn't matter. The problem isn't the machines flipping ballots. The problem is that there's ballots being stuffed in your elections. Let me give you one more example of that. Everybody's seen this graph of Michigan where the tally was going up and up and up, and then 11 o'clock in 2020, the election stopped, remember, in 6 states, and then suddenly it jumped by 156,000 and then continued on.
The F curve.
That is not flipping ballots. That's adding ballots.
Okay, Dr. Douglas Frank, thank you so much for coming on.
Good to be with you today.
That's great to have you here. So to give you a proper introduction, you are from Morrow, Ohio.
Yep.
You have 45 years experience in modeling elections.
Yes.
Wow, that is very, very impressive. And you are currently traveling the entire nation working on grassroots reform of our elections.
That's right.
Okay, that's excellent. I really appreciate you doing that.
I'm glad I didn't start out that way. I started out in 2020, December, thinking that we could fix elections at the legislative level. And then most of 2021, at the request of legislatures, analyzing their elections, speaking to them in private meetings, and sometimes addressing the larger body of the legislature, and thinking that all I had to do was show them what was wrong and they would address it. But I discovered during that year that no, they like the way the system is now and they don't want to change it. So I had to kind of learn that. It took me about a year to learn that lesson.
Yeah, I've learned that lesson the hard way as well.
Yeah.
The legislator can absolutely be disappointing, especially for optimistic individuals like us that
exactly.
think that our country is still in good shape.
And we ain't in such good shape, are we?
Not at all.
We're in desperate need of political and spiritual revival. And so as I'm traveling the country and doing grassroots reform, I don't see it merely as a political effort. It's also a spiritual revival. And I'm seeing both happen. It's pretty exciting. I see, how many tens of millions of people are taking constitutional classes. When has that happened? I'm 64 years old. I don't remember that in my life. And I see churches waking up all over the place. The whole notion of the Black Robe Regiment is coming back into our churches because the churches led a revolution in 1776. And a lot of the churches are waking up. So it's pretty exciting to see a political and spiritual revival at the same time.
That's great. You mentioned the Black Robe Regiment. If it wasn't for the pastors that actually left the church, people that left the pew and trained our militias to fight, America would not be what it is today.
100%. So I like it. As I travel the country, I like speaking in the taverns and I like speaking in the churches because that's where the first revolution started too.
So for somebody like me, I have not been involved nearly as long as you have. So after diving in, after watching 2,000 Mules, after watching Selection Code with Tina Peters, Let My People Go with David Clements, meeting with Clay Parikh, that was Carrie Lake's expert witness. We had him on a previous podcast.
Clay's great.
So guys like us, we sort of understand more of the technical aspect of how our elections are compromised.
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear to our viewers, our elections are not possibly concerning. They're not something to possibly worry about. They are 100% compromised.
100%
there
compromised.
Is no
Every aspect of your elections are compromised.
Yeah. So we have such a low voter turnout, right, in our country. It should be much higher. And unfortunately, the people of America, the citizens, have good reason for that. Because, if you talk to your average person and you ask them, do you think our votes really matter? Do you think that we're actually electing our officials? Or do you think they're being selected? Most people will tell you, oh, they're being selected. yeah, our vote doesn't
Yeah.
count, but they don't really understand exactly what that means.
There was a Rasmussen poll on that, and something like a Rasmussen poll, and something like 70% of the people in our country don't trust our elections. So you're right. There's ubiquitous concern about it.
And you ask most people, and they're going to say, "Oh, well, the media, right? They just tend to steer perception and the propaganda, and it's the media that's doing it. It's making people vote a certain way."
Right.
Surely that plays a part.
Of course, it's a contributor. Sure.
Yeah, it plays a part in it. And if we got rid of our voting machines, tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the next step, right? Is working on fixing the media, the manipulation of the voters. I mean, that's the next step.
I mean, I wouldn't say that that's the next step. I think the real problem, I'm not saying that isn't a problem. It's a serious problem. The core problem is that the local people aren't in control of their election. So it's sort of like people say, well, gee, what does it take to clean your kid's room? If you go in and clean your kid's room, but you let your kid back in, it's a disaster in 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same way with our elections. The problem is we're letting other people run our elections rather than us. So it needs to be locally controlled with local eyes and local hands. We need to vote in person and manage your rolls locally, manage the ballots locally, do the counts locally under local eyes. And the problem is every aspect of our elections has been delegated to someone else. So the machines are just part of the problem, because you got the voter rolls. That's the first big problem. Then you got the process of voting itself. There's huge problems there. And then the process of reporting, huge problems there. So there's like every category is just loaded with problems. And almost all of the problems we have are because each of those steps are not under local scrutiny, not run by you, not run by me. Now, you look like a young guy to me, but I'm 64. And I remember when we used to vote in person on election day on paper, and the ballots went in a box over there. And at the end of the day, the PTA moms and the party members got out and counted the ballots that very night. And we did it all in one day. No big deal.
And France, Germany does it. Yeah.
And what's the difference between then and now? The difference between then and now is that then we were doing it. The people were engaged, and the people showed up to vote because the people got to count and people were engaged. Now everything's been taken away. So there's apathy, not merely just because they don't trust the system, but also apathy because they're not involved. You're definitely going to be more involved in something that you're part of. I mean, you're going to trust something more and engage more.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite ideas I've heard, and I'm not suggesting it necessarily as a real solution, but I think it's worth talking about, is wouldn't it be nice if we had our government class, our graduates from high school, the 12th graders, wouldn't it be cool if they counted the ballots in the elections?
That would be so cool.
I mean, think about it. As part of their government class for a senior in high school, they have to participate in an election. Our youngest people are the lowest participants in our elections. So they're not engaged. Well, hey, maybe that's because we're not engaging them. Let's give them something to do. Maybe that'll get them engaged. So I know here I just met with the Eagle Forum kids, the student Eagles at the event this morning, and they're very engaged. I bet you could get a mile-long line of kids that would love to count ballots in an election. That would be fun. And it would engage them,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So obviously, Dr. Frank, this is the most important issue that there is.
I think so.
The most important.
All the other issues you care about, which are valid issues, abortion, taxes, pornography in schools, all those issues that are important, but they're all downstream from who did you put in office?
Absolutely.
So you've got to fix that.
That's the step. If you're not liking our laws, if you're not liking the way that things are going in government, that's what you do is you work on getting the people out of there that are not representing the people. Right. But if you can't do that, if the vote is compromised, it's pretty much all political theater at that point.
100%. Stalin said it doesn't matter who casts the votes. What matters is who counts the votes.
That's right.
When's the last time you were counting votes? So, in other words, what you're doing doesn't matter. So I understand the apathy when people say, oh, it doesn't matter anyway. It's all selection. Why get involved? They're sort of right.
Yeah.
They're sort of right. And we need to take back our elections. And that's what I teach grassroots how to do. That's why grassroots reform is what I'm doing.
So I hear a lot of media outlets, their excuse for not having individuals like you, Mike Lindell on is, I haven't seen enough evidence to really, I never really have a clear picture of exactly how our elections are being manipulated.
Yeah.
And at the same time, again, most of us are in agreement that our elections are compromised. But just for the average person, can you break down? I'm sure everybody's wanting to ask this question right now.
Sure.
Explain, how are elections being manipulated?
The simplest way to think about this in Alabama, and I'm working with teams here in Alabama, we've got a really good leadership team right now in the state that's been sending me to different counties and arranging meetings with sheriffs and whatnot. And so definitely your listeners, if they want to get involved, we are building an infrastructure that you can be part of. So basically what I show people first, just the first stepping into this, is your voter rolls. Because that's the first step of an election. You get people signed up to vote. Your voter rolls, where are your voter rolls? Everybody thinks, well, doesn't my local judge have them? No. Well, does the Secretary of State have them? No. They're in Omaha, Nebraska. ES&S has your voter rolls. And so when your probate judge, your local judge says, we're going to put you on the voter rolls, they don't bring out a book and put your name in the book. They log into the computer in Omaha, Nebraska, and add your name to a voter rolls in Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, but wait a minute. Our former Secretary of
John
State
Merrill
told us that our election systems do not connect to Wi-Fi. So are they driving them down here?
Well, what he's talking about when he talks about election systems, he's talking about the tabulators that's counting the ballots. The claim, and they're wrong, but the claim is that those machines are not connected. But no one denies that the registration rolls are all online. Everybody acknowledges that, including the poll books that you use when they're electronic poll books. So if your local probate judge wants to add somebody, they have to log into a system in Omaha, Nebraska. If you pass away and they want to take you out, they have to log into the system in Omaha, Nebraska. And so they're adding and removing people. So I was sitting with a probate judge here in Alabama yesterday, and I was explaining to her that was the case. And she says, I don't like that. And when there's a storm in Nebraska, I can't get logged in. It's really a pain in the butt. And I said, yeah, I know that's a problem. But did you realize that you're not the one in control of the rolls? You're just adding and removing a few people. Did you realize that 20 times that many people are being added and removed to the rolls that you're not even aware of? And when I tell them that, they're like, what are you talking about? And so I actually bring out copies of their voter rolls. And I've been working with a lady named Suzanne here in the state. She and I have been doing this. We have multiple copies of the voter rolls, and we can show who's being added and removed. And so the clerk or the probate judge thinks they're adding, a few people here and there, but actually the state's adding way more. They don't even know about it. And so yesterday when I was showing it to one of the probate clerks, her jaw literally, she had no idea. So the first problem is that you're not in control of your voter rolls. But the supporting problem to that is your registrars don't even know that. That's a huge problem. So in other words, they're just as much in the dark as you and I, the casual citizen, are. They don't even realize that. So that's the first problem, because, who do you send it to vote? So that's a big problem. And somebody might say, well, who cares if the voter rolls are dirty? And who cares if they're adding and removing people? Why does that matter? Well, the reason it matters is because it used to be 15 years ago that your local registrar had control of the voter rolls, and they would be adding local people. Okay, I know Mildred moved into town. We'll add her to the rolls. And John passed away. I'll take him out. They were in control. Now it's being controlled somewhere far away, and they don't know what's happening. So what happens is about 70% of your voting age population should be in the rolls. That's a normal, healthy rolls. The state, once they took over control, they started automatically adding people who get a driver's license, automatically added people who renew a license, automatically added people who touch government housing or welfare or go to jail. So what's happened is your voter rolls have filled up from being only 70% of the voting population to 100% of the voting age population. But if you look at that top 30%, they aren't real voters. They're constantly churning. They're being added and removed all the time. And someone says, well, who cares? Who cares that they're doing that? The answer is every one of those names can be used to cast a ballot. And because they're being added and removed from the rolls so often, it's like constantly having a credit line of names you can use to cast ballots. So everybody thinks that the elections are being stolen by flipping ballots. But I always tell people, it doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. So a lot of times people say, we want to do a recount. We want to catch the fraud. Doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the register. What matters is how many of the bills are counterfeit. And what's happening is all these ballots are coming into your elections. You're counting them by machine. You could count them by hand counting. Doesn't matter. The problem isn't the machines flipping ballots. The problem is that there's ballots being stuffed in your elections. Let me give you one more example of that. Everybody's seen this graph of Michigan where the tally was going up and up and up, and then 11 o'clock in 2020, the election stopped, remember, in 6 states, and then suddenly it jumped by 156,000 and then continued on.
The F curve.
That is not flipping ballots. That's adding ballots.
I see.
You've added 156,000 new voters and 156,000 new votes. And I was in that case. It was in Antrim, Michigan. And the judge ordered the Secretary of State to give us the list of those voters. We were going to go knock on those doors and find out these people who supposedly voted. And the Secretary of State of Michigan acknowledged the judge's order and said, we will comply. But Judge, it'll take us 2 years to put together that list.
So if I understand this correctly, here in the state of Alabama, we didn't have drop boxes.
Right.
So we didn't really have the ballot dumps happening.
You had about 20% and 30% in some of your counties.
Oh, we did.
That came in by mail. Remotely.
I see, mail-in voting. That's the part I was missing.
Yeah.
So we're saying
you still have about 5 to 10% in your counties right now.
Okay. So would you say that, yes, we do have the vote flipping going on with the machines, but don't they have to produce the ballots to match that?
That's exactly.
So you have to have both.
There you go. Yes.
I see.
And in the case that I just mentioned, in the Michigan case where it went up and then jumped to 156,000, 4 hours later, we have the videotape of this. The truck backed up to the building, and there's the ballot with 156,000 ballots on it, all shrinked up and beautiful ballots. And so, like I say, it doesn't matter how you count those ballots. You can count them with the machines. You can count them by hand. You can count them standing on your head.
So really, some places could actually take a risk, right, and not have the ballots to back it up and just hope there's not an audit. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are. In fact, this morning at the Eagle Forum talk, some of my the team members here in Alabama talked about the fact that once the ballots are tabulated in your state, they're sealed and then they're held in a jail, and those ballots are never seen again unless a court order brings them out.
So the ballots in a lot of places are pretty much like insurance.
Yes.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Yeah, because in Alabama, I don't remember the last time we've actually had a post-election audit.
No, and the judge has to order access to those ballots, and that takes a court order. And in order to get a court order, you have to have standing. And so that's another aspect of this work that I do, is I teach people how to find actual real fraud. And they don't find it by doing recounts because they can't get to the ballots. They can't do a recount. They find it by looking at the voter rolls, and you find that John Smith died 10 years ago, but yet we counted a ballot from him. So that's proof that there was fraud. Or we find John Smith lives in Alabama, but he also lives in Texas, and he's voting in both places. How do we do that? We have voter rolls both places. So the voter rolls is our access to being able to prove that there's a problem. And then once we can prove there's a problem, then potentially we could get a court order at that point. Now that's especially another issue that the team here in Alabama has brought up. And I was aware of this years ago when I came here with Mr. Lindell at the beginning and met with Mr. Merrill, your former Secretary of State, is that one of the ways your state is hiding that from you is, let's say you want a copy of the voter rolls. I know you're working on Dean Odell's campaign, right?
Right.
If you want a copy of the voter rolls, it's going to cost you $38,000 to buy that copy of the voter rolls.
Yes, unfortunately.
And so the state is also hiding that from the average citizen. I mean, who has $38,000 just lying around? We're going to write a check. Let's say I'm concerned about the election and I want to audit the voter rolls because, like I just explained, that's what we can use to find fraud. Well, if we audit that, but we have to pay $38,000 to get it. But so fortunately, I've been working with your teams here in the state, and we've got 4 copies of your voter rolls. They're spaced about 1 year apart for the last 4 years, and we can show the churn of the voter rolls, people being added and removed. We can track who's voted and who's not voted, and we can add back into the rolls people that have been deleted, and we can find fraud. And that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, so I actually have, I think it was 21 voter, thanks to Mike Lindell. He came down and purchased.
I know, I was with him that day.
Yeah, so I have Jason Sly.
Yes.
You remember Jason?
I remember.
Yeah,
I'm the one who gave it to Jason.
Okay, so I got it from Jason.
Yes.
Yeah, so I have Shelby County and St. Clair County, but I don't have the most recent. And again, there's so many people on there. I don't even know where to begin to even start finding fraud and modeling. I mean, there's a lot of dead voters on there.
Yes,
I'll tell you that.
And so that's why we've been forming teams. We call them 7 Steps teams. I have this little trifold I wrote called 7 Steps for Taking Back Our Elections. I'll give you a copy when we're done. And in there, the step 1 is to get connected, and then step 2 is you form a team. And then we will train your team how to do this. And we've been doing that all around the country. And what we're trying to do is get, say, half a dozen to a dozen of your Alabama counties, teams in those counties finding fraud. And then once they're finding fraud in the election, they can say to the state, hey, wait a minute, this system that you're imposing upon us is allowing fraud in our election. Here's the evidence. Here's the evidence there's fraud in our election because of your system. We're not going to use your system because we don't have to use any system that compromises our constitutional rights. And here it is. So that's how we're doing it. But we don't want to just fight one county at a time. We're trying to get a group of counties to stand together. It's much more successful. I've been doing that all around the country.
In the state of Alabama, there's a lot of disagreement within the movement of people that believe our elections are compromised. So that, you talk to a lot of folks and they will say China is hacking our elections.
Yeah.
And then you talk to other people and they're saying it's not China. It's the local precincts. It's the counties that are doing it. Would you say it's both?
The way I like describing this is the same way that Patrick Byrne does. He says there are a dozen ways to cheat your elections, and they use whichever ways are the most suitable to the situation. So Alabama laws are different than Wisconsin laws that are different than Georgia laws, and the systems are different. And so in some cases, it's being done at the precinct level. In other cases, it's being done remotely. The example I gave you in Michigan where the voter rolls suddenly jumped by 156,000, that was done electronically. And that could have been done by somebody sitting at a computer in China. Now, the reason why people think of China is because Mr. Lindell was given 7 terabytes of recordings, of network recordings during the 2020 election. He was given that list on January 9th of 2021, which is why he later held that cyber symposium. And when he traces all that network recording, 90% of it was from Wuhan. So not Wuhan, I forgot, Huawei in China. And so that's why people say it's happening from China. And if another reason people would say it's from China is, notice in June of this year, Kash Patel announced that the FBI seized 1 million fake driver's licenses and 1 million fake ballots in October of 2020, before the election, that had been produced in China.
I heard that. Yes.
And so those ballots, what is that? That goes back to what I said. The main way that the cheating is happening, the industrial scale cheating, is massive ballot stuffing. And how do you stuff ballots? You have to have an ID. And you have to have an ID and a ballot. And guess what? But you also need to have a name in the rolls that matches that license. That's why this inflation of the voter rolls ahead of time it's like the setup for the steal, if that makes sense.
I see.
And so then there's every one of those ballots comes in, and there's an ID that goes with it, and it matches somebody in the rolls, so it gets counted. It doesn't matter how you count the ballots at that point, does it? Now, in the example I gave with the Michigan example where it jumped up 156,000, those 156,000 voters were added electronically, and then the ballots came later. So in that case, the stuffing was after the fact to kind of cover up the electronic activity. So there are multiple, or if you saw the movie 2,000 Mules, you mentioned that early on with Dinesh D'Souza's movie. Mm-hmm. Those ballots were being produced in local ballot mills, and then local mules were depositing them in drop boxes.
Local ballot mills.
Yes.
Wow.
And so but there's a variety of ways. In other words, it depends where you're at, how it's happened. And we've proven every one of those situations in multiple places around the country.
So it's just a combination of all of it.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why I say the solution isn't only one thing. The solution is you got to bring it all back under your local eyes and local control. And then you can defend yourself. You can't defend it if any part of the system is out of your control.
Okay, so now can we go through the process of actually, like, what happens? So when someone votes,
Yeah.
right, they fill out the ballot.
Yeah. Are you talking in person or by mail?
In person.
Okay.
So they go to the polls.
Yes.
They fill out their ballot.
Yeah.
They enter it into the machine.
Yeah.
So of course we know there's a couple scenarios. I've heard something about fractional voting.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
I've heard something recently about wireless cards, like cell phone cards in our machines.
Yes,
Wasn't there a machine that was opened up not long ago?
All of your DS200s, which is the ESNS machine you use to tabulate, they all have modems in it.
So they all have modems in them.
Absolutely, they do.
So in Alabama, I believe, Suzanne,
yeah.
Suzanne, I'm so sorry, Suzanne. Suzanne, I talked to a legislator the other day, and he said that we outlawed or banned modems in our machines in the state of Alabama. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you're saying it correctly.
So,
it's just that they equate turning them off with removing the hardware. And from what I understand, they're pretty much soldered onto the motherboard, so you're not going to remove it.
Right. She's correct.
Has anyone opened a machine in Alabama?
In Alabama, I'm unaware, but in other states, we've court-ordered, had them open, and there's the modem right there. And ESNS has admitted this, by the way. This is not a debatable topic. ESNS admits it shipped 33,000 machines around the country, the exact model that you have with the modems in them.
So why, when I go and ask our legislators, I'll run into them randomly.
Yeah.
And I always bring this up.
Sure.
Are you aware of how compromised our elections are?
Right.
And I always ask them, have you, and they're like, no, I mean, I know that we've made the modem and Wi-Fi connectivity illegal.
Yeah.
And I always ask them this, have you seen the documentary, Let My People Go?
Right.
Every time they say
Professor
no,
Clements, yeah.
They tell me no every time. And I'm thinking, how in the world? I mean, to me, that should be the number one documentary in America. I mean, if there was no throttling in the algorithm,
right,
there's no way that shouldn't be the number one documentary in America. And it was funny. Yesterday, I tried Googling you, somebody that's traveling around the nation.
I've given over 1,000 public presentations, flyers, big events.
Talking about the most important issue in our country. And I have to scroll down to even find you. And I find like one video of you, and then you scroll down some more, and there's another one.
Yeah.
It is so obvious at this point. And again, when I talk to my legislators, I'll get to explaining them this. I'll say, hey, I'll send you that documentary so you can watch it. Please watch it. It's the most powerful and important documentary you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I'll start getting into explaining what's in that documentary and how our machines are being compromised and how John Merrill was sued by Focus on America and what happened in the Haynes v. Merrill. And when I do that, they start trailing off. And it's like I lose them.
Right.
It's like every single time, it's like they're in a trance. And I can't figure out if it's they think, oh, well, this guy believes something that's conspiracy theories,
right? Or
they're fearful.
There's some of that.
Figure out which one it is.
Well, it's a combination of things. There are some that are fearful.
Okay.
You're also, because I can tell you stories about that. People who have stepped up. And it's like the third rail of politics. And so if you talk about election integrity, you are eliminated. And I can show you state after state, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Louisiana, Alaska, Missouri, where I had legislators there who were at the lead. They were at the spear point for fighting for election integrity, and the Republican Party itself eliminates them. So there's fear to protect your job. And so they're afraid to talk about election integrity because of that. There's also personal threats. Democrats, and the Secretary of State of Louisiana resigned because we cornered him and in front of a television camera and got him to admit that all their machines were hacked, and he resigned. And so there's fear, there's that sort of thing, but also, I spent the whole first year of my work, almost all of 2021, meeting with legislators and speaking at the request of legislatures looking at their own elections, Kansas. And I public testimony, formal testimony in front of those committees. They have zero interest in fixing these elections. The legislators like it this way. The party likes it this way because it gives them a sense of control. And I hear this all the time. The Republican Party will say, "Oh, Dr. Frank, we like early voting because early voting lets us know who's voted already, so we know who to contact. We save money on phone banks. We save money on follow-up mail when we know in advance. We like having the tally of who's turned in a ballot already because we know who to contact to chase ballots. It makes them feel like, oh, let's get on the phone bank and call that precinct. The turnout from that precinct is too low." So they like having the intel, if that makes sense. It gives them a sense of control in the elections because governments like control. That's one of their driving things. The problem is that if they have access like that, then the bad guys have access like that, and the bad guys are cheating. So we have to cut that off. It's like when you're in a war, you don't want to give intel to your enemy. Even if you like the ability to get intel, you're not going to cheat, but they are. I have one of my favorite stories is the Secretary of State of Louisiana was saying, "Oh, no, Dr. Frank, we're the gold standard in network security in the country." Every state says that, by the way, that they're all the gold standard. And I said, "What do you mean you're the gold standard?" He says, "Are you kidding?" He says, "Check out this app I have on my phone. I can track every voting machine in the state in real time." And he thinks that makes him secure. That's the problem is that, but he likes that because it makes him feel, he likes having an electronic system because it makes him feel like he has security now, that he can control it. Same way with your legislators. And then another aspect is the legislators, you're going to say, well, wait a minute, this system is corrupt. And they're saying the system that got me elected is corrupt. So are you saying that I'm corrupt? So it's like they don't want to question the system that put them in office either.
I tell the legislators that every time I talk to them about this. Just because I'm saying our elections are compromised
doesn't mean you were correct.
Doesn't mean I'm saying you were illegitimately elected.
But there's very little incentive on their part is the point. They've got lots of reasons to not say anything. The Republican Party doesn't support it. They look like conspiracy wingnuts because they don't even understand it themselves. I spend most of my time just explaining their own elections to them when I meet with these guys. I mean, think about it. Your representatives are not election experts. They're experts at whatever field they are. They're attorneys, they're real estate people, whatever it is, they're business people, whoever they are. Their expertise is not elections, and our elections become so complicated that very few people understand them. It takes technical geeks like me and Suzanne and Bob, who just went over to Germany and has broken down the system into all its components. It's a technical challenge. It's a whole research project to understand our elections. No wonder they don't understand it. But because it's so complicated, that actually provides lots of room for funny business to take place. And your legislators are busy. They're reading bills, passing laws. And so there's a lot of reasons why the legislature is the wrong approach. It's why I spend all my effort at the grassroots these days.
Yeah, could you explain that? And how you mentioned we can't go from the top down. We have to go from the bottom.
The solution, I've already tried the solution top down. I've met with 24 secretaries of states, 24 AGs, testified before 12 legislatures. Nothing happens that way. And the old saying goes, politicians don't start parades, they join them. So what we need to do is we need to start the parade that then they will join. You're giving them political cover. When the people are rising up and say, we want this, and the politician is going to say, yeah, I'm your representative. I will support you on that. But we can't expect the legislator to go out front and say, I'm going to stand for something, because they need that underpinning. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that I teach counties how to find actual fraud in their election. In other words, they're going to find dead people who cast ballots in their election. They're going to find people who voted in other places. And what that does is it empowers them. And the example I give is this. Let's say that the governor said, we're going to take away everybody's guns. We're backing up our trucks to the building tomorrow. You all turn in your guns. Well, all you people would say, no, we're not going to comply with that because that violates our Second Amendment rights and our Second Amendment obligation to be armed and proficient. So no, we're not going to comply. We understand that. Well, when the government says, give us your ballots, it's the same. If it's compromising our constitutional rights, we don't have to comply. So that's why I teach the local counties how to find fraud in their own elections, because then we are proving that the system that's being imposed upon them is enabling the fraud. And so they don't have to use it then. And so they can tell the state, no. In fact, Jefferson said, any law or policy that violates your constitutional rights, you have a duty to not comply with it. And so all I need are half a dozen counties or so to stand together, link elbows, and this is why I work with the sheriffs too, because they're the constitutional officers for the county, link elbows and say to the state, we have found fraud in our own elections because of this system, so we're going to run it locally. We're not going to comply. We're going to protect the constitutional rights of our citizens here.
Now, if I understand this correctly, let's say worst case, we cannot get that done as quick as we want.
It's likely we won't get it done quickly as we like.
So
war always takes longer than you think.
Isn't it quicker just to figure out how to get access to that cast vote record file that we have a constitutional right to have? The cast vote record file, from what I understand, I could be wrong on this. Maybe the information has changed since I last brought this up. But from what I understand, there's a thumb drive that is plugged into those machines the entire election. They take that thumb drive, they take it to the courthouse, they plug it into a laptop. Of course, that laptop is
connected to Omaha, Nebraska.
And made in China.
Right.
So I think it was our Secretary of State, when you're asking a lot of these sheriffs, why can't we see that cast vote record file that'll tell us what happened in that machine?
Most states let you see that. We have that for most of the country.
Our state won't.
Right.
And they tell us that it's the Secretary of State that are directing them not to give it to any of the citizens. And not only that, they're threatening the probate judges, telling them that you will not even talk with people like yourself. They won't even let them meet with you in a lot of cases.
Absolutely. So, I've been blackballed in a lot of states.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's clear. It's like, if you don't have anything to hide, why would you not sit down and be transparent?
If you didn't have anything to hide, you'd give away your voter rolls for no charge.
Absolutely.
If you didn't have anything to hide, you'd give away the CVRs. Most states give away the CVRs, cast vote records. I have seen thousands of those. And I even have the Edison series, which is the live reporting of the elections in real time for the entire country, for every precinct from the 2020 election. I got it with Sidney Powell because I was working, that was her Kraken. And I'm telling you, all of that evidence is still, it's impotent. The evidence is not what we need. We need the harm. We need the evidence of harm. Here's an example. Let's say there's a busy intersection in your city and it's dangerous. And so a bunch of moms get together and say, our kids are at risk because of this intersection. We want a new stoplight there. And they talk to and the statistics are going to be, we're going to lose one kid every 3 years or whatever. They quote all these statistics and do all this analysis. Is anything going to happen? Nothing happens. The county leaders say, well, we'll look into it. We have to get a budget and, we have to get the engineers involved, blah, blah, blah. But the first weekend that Johnny gets run over in the intersection, watch what happens. There's a stoplight there the next week. In other words, once there's harm, once there's injury and you show the injury, then you can get action. Because then you have the hard evidence. And so you mentioned at the beginning, you have legislators who are saying, well, I haven't seen enough evidence. Well, you know why? Because the only evidence these guys are being shown is the statistical stuff and the CVRs and the fact that the machines are online. So what if the machines are online? Was there any harm? So what if the machines are hackable? Was there any harm? So what if the voter rolls are dirty? Was there any harm? You have to come up and say, here's the fraud that happened in my election because of this system. Now you have harm. Now you have the hard evidence. That's the difference.
So wait, so you're telling me that you can't look at the cast vote record file and see that a vote was taken from someone and there's the harm.
No.
You can't see that.
No, that you can't see it from the cast vote record. And second of all, who's giving you the cast vote record?
Oh, it's the sheriff's office, right?
No, it's the probate judge or the state.
Judge, that's
and
correct.
it's coming out of a machine. Did you have the source code for that produced that record?
I see.
It's sort of like you might say to me, Doug, give me the books for your business. Okay. Am I going to give you the books for my business that expose the fraud in my business? No, I'm going to give you a cleaned up version. And so once again, we're at their mercy because we're not in control. They're in control. We have to take back local control before we secure that. Now, because the cast vote records are revealing, I'm not saying they're not revealing. They show all kinds of funny business going on. But the cast vote records alone are not very valuable. The cast vote records it doesn't tell you who voted. It tells you that a ballot was counted at this period of time. This is how every bubble on the ballot was interpreted, and this is the tally and how the tally was changed. So the cast vote record documents what the machine is doing. Then that paper ballot goes into a box. What would be very interesting is to take the cast vote record and take the paper ballots and compare them 1-to-1 and see if the machine is accurately reporting what was on the paper. But you don't get to do that, do you?
No, we don't.
And so the cast vote records alone, to me, are kind of impotent. You really need to have the ballots. Now, a perfect example of this was in 2020 in the primary. Dr. Shiva, he was an MIT professor. He's a left-leaning guy from MIT, ran, and in the primary election, he lost, and he knew something was wrong because you looked at the statistics of his race, it didn't make sense. So he went to court and he sued, and the court judge ordered the CVRs, the images of the ballots that were on the computer, and the paper ballots all brought out.
Wow, what a miracle.
And this was in 2020, and it's Dr. Shiva, you can look it up. And when they compared, they discovered that the machines, and this is an example of a machine messing up, or deliberately messing up, the first, say, 20,000 ballots were done properly. But after that, every fourth ballot was a copy of an earlier ballot in the digital images of the ballots. Because what happens is the machines don't actually, it's not like the old Scantrons where it's just looking at bubbles. It makes digital images of the ballots, and then the software processes those digital images to do the tallying. So if you're adding ballots, every fourth ballot is just a copy of an earlier ballot. You're shifting how the election's going to get counted. And the only way if I gave you the cast vote record, you wouldn't know that. You need to see the original paper ballot that goes along with that cast vote record and compare and make sure. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
And then you mentioned the movie Selection Code. And that was about Tina Peters. Yes. I was very involved in that. And in that case, we proved that after the first 25,000 votes or so were tallied, then a new set of books was created in the software, which then gave them the ability to control the outcome. And that's a public record now because we got those backups.
So you bring that up, Selection Code with Tina Peters. Yes. How in the world does that judge get away with that? When she did her job, clearly.
I testified at her sentencing, and I also am the one who set up the backups in the very beginning in her county. And so the reason why that situation is the way it is because Rubenstein, the attorney, that was the prosecuting attorney in that case, he was being interviewed on TV. He said, "We're prosecuting Tina Peters so that no other clerk in the country will ever question the integrity of their elections again." That's almost a direct quote of what he said.
And I hear
they made an example out of her.
And Trump is not able to do anything because it's a state.
It's a state thing, yeah. But
issue.
I wouldn't say he's not able to do anything. He's doing some things.
Okay.
And I was with Mike Lindell at CPAC, and Mr. Lindell was given 90 minutes in the Oval Office with President Trump on Friday at CPAC. And I was with Mike before and after, right after that, 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after. And Mike said that when he told President Trump that Tina Peters was in prison, and I know for a fact because I've sat at the dinner table with Trump and Tina, that he knows who she is. When Mike told President Trump that she was in prison, he pointed to his attorneys across the other side of the room and he says, "Get her out. Get her out." And the very next week, the Department of Justice launched an investigation into the state of Colorado for lawfare against Tita Peters. So that's happening. And he's been putting pressure on them, including taking Space Force out of Colorado and moving it here to Alabama. He's doing all kinds of pressure that he is able to do. But I think what's really going to happen, and I see this strategy migrating to this, is they're setting up a federal case in that state. She was prosecuted under state courts. They're setting up a federal case, which she will be a witness in. Then they can get her out of prison under federal witness protection. So, yeah, and if you follow the media these days, you'll see, or follow the discussion about Tina Peters, you'll find that they're trying to get her transferred to a federal prison. She's in a state prison right now. And
that's what I've seen.
The state is holding her on purpose. And the problem is Trump would have to cross a lot of lines to get her out, and sort of like when he said federal troops into counties and states. It's a pretty big deal for him to he can't just pardon her. There's some serious issues there, but we got to get her out. She's a great lady. She's a Gold Star mom. I am the one that met with her originally and set up the backups and got that all done in April of 2021. So I know her personally, and she's a charming, wonderful lady. I helped promote her around the country when she was under house arrest for a year. I would Zoom her in my public presentations, and so she could talk to people and not feel all secluded.
Yeah, it's such a sad story, especially actually going through the evidence and looking at everything, knowing that she is 100% wrongfully. And
she hasn't done anything illegal.
Yeah, did her job, if anything.
To make sure that she did her job.
Yes.
I brought in legal counsel who counseled her on every step of what she did. I brought in a federally licensed white hat hacker, a penetration tester, federally licensed, and an attorney who coached her through every step of what she did to make sure everything we did was legal.
And lost her husband, right? Lost her
father. Yeah.
And her father. She doesn't have anybody left. I mean, it's just, there's a respect for the law that everyone should have.
Yeah.
But when the law just completely just does you wrong in that kind of sense, it's
tyranny in Colorado.
I can only imagine if her son was still alive today. Makes me question if that judge would still be breathing at this point, to be honest with you.
I hear you.
But yeah, so getting on to they. Everyone wants to.
Who's the they?
They stealing the elections.
Yeah.
Theys, the tyrannical theys, right? So let's start off in Alabama. We know on the national level, the theys is mostly the deep state. I mean,
correct.
Right, there is a deep state that
100%.
is permanent government. They're not elected really. They're in there for decades.
Yes.
And they control the show behind the scenes.
Right.
So when we get to the state levels, we call them the establishment, basically.
Good call.
But at the end of the day, it's the same thing.
Yes, it is.
Permanent capital, wherever that city is, is the people that are still in power.
Yes.
And then you look at previous governors. Usually they go on to open consulting firms and they're funding certain candidates and the special interest groups are involved. And then you end up in a situation to where someone gets elected, let's say lieutenant governor, and they just raised tens of millions of dollars to get elected. Therefore,
who do they owe?
The special interest groups, the consultants will be so mad if I even hint at the fact that I was possibly elected illegitimately. Yeah. So I think that has to do with a lot of that. But
there's a lot of that, yes.
So just to clear it up, to go on to the theys, who they are.
Yes.
We have our establishment that's involved.
That's valid. Yep.
In Alabama, we had what's called an Alabama pick list, is what they called it. And actually, one of our gubernatorial candidates in 22 admitted that he is aware of the Alabama pick list, that he knows that it exists.
These are the people who are going to be in office.
Yes. So they have a list of who they are picking, of who they want elected.
Yep.
And I don't know how much you've gone into the history of Alabama So,
not too much in Alabama. I'm
So-
mostly election stuff. Election history, a lot of, yes.
well, so on this podcast, we are never afraid to name names. So I'm going
right.
to tell you like it is here.
Good.
We have a guy named Bob Riley. He's one of our former governors. I mean, a lot of people call him the godfather of political corruption in Alabama.
Wow.
You know, while I have no proof of it, there's allegedly there's stories of when George Bush was elected, Bob Riley would be on Bush's plane frequently, and they figured out how to use Alabama to launder money. So
I wouldn't doubt it.
we have connections with Bob Riley going to China multiple times. We saw, again, I have to say allegedly, I guess, but where John Merrill, some say that he was seen with a sort of a Fang, a Chinese spy. He was also conveniently appointed to the China Heartland Association.
I
He was
knew about
on
that one, yeah.
That was specialized in bringing businesses to China.
Yeah.
And when you put all of that together, and then knowing that John Merrill traveled the state of Alabama, I think it was in 22, lying to everyone, telling everybody that we have the gold standard of elections, that he, no, our machines do not connect to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. I had them custom built that way, so they do not connect to Wi-Fi. And then, of course, the Haynes v. Merrill, I think the lease agreement came out in a certain county. Clay Parikh was telling me about that.
Clay's an expert at this.
And Bob, Bob Rich, and showed Wi-Fi, Bluetooth connectivity in our polling laptops. So it would only make sense, again, I have to say allegedly, I guess, but it would make sense, a certain scenario that a lot of people believe that Alabama pick list was created somewhere, originated, I'm surely by Bob Riley. Okay, his people are still in power. He still owns a consulting firm down in Montgomery. And then the reason John Merrill was covering and protecting the voting machines was he was the one that then received that pick list that some say then went to the Chinese spy, that went to the Chinese consulate general, that then would go to the big building that we have full of hackers that manipulate our elections. So when somebody says China's manipulating our elections, I believe that. I believe that's true.
I have no doubt.
But I think that in every state, like you said, it's a combination.
Yes.
You can't just have China manipulating our elections.
No, you need boots on the ground. Somebody's got to deliver the ballots.
So our establishment, our consulting firms, our special interest groups are the one funding them.
NGOs.
Yes, and then we even have what's called the Matrix LLC in Alabama. They're an opposition firm that is designed to make up dirt, dig up dirt on people, and some say even make you disappear. So there's the muscle behind it, funding millions of dollars. Joe Perkins is the one who started that opposition firm, and the guy is snake in the grass piece of dirt that's going around and being paid millions of dollars to sell out the people of Alabama, to sell us out. So at that point, it's not a matter of, do our constitutional rights count? Does our vote count? We have people being paid to screw us over. So I just wanted to explain all that just so the audience is clear when we say they. I really wanted to get into what exactly that means, who they is.
So I think everything you just said, I have no doubt about. I think the problem with that sort of thing is, like you say, you end up having to say alleged, and what are we going to do about it? And how do we do anything about it? It's good information, but it's kind of impotent. I'll give you one more example. In 2006, George Soros announced what he called the Secretary of State Project. You can look it up online. And he said on a TV interview that by 2020, he was going to own every Secretary of State in the country. And so this is sort of like the they, like at the level that you're talking about, the they. And how is he going to do that? By buying elections. And manipulating the system. And I would say that today, I've met with a lot of these guys. I would say we have 2 good Secretaries of States today in the country out of 50. We have 2.
That's good to hear. At least there's some that exist.
Exactly. But it's uphill battle for them, and they are shrewd, and they are working hard. And it's Wyoming and Missouri are the 2. But but that's sort of the high level they. There's also another level. It's the low level they. And let me give you an example of that. So I was in Los Angeles recently, a couple of years ago actually, and I was speaking to a large group of Republican women there. And one of the mothers stood up at the end. She raised her hand. She says, "My son goes to UCLA. And just last week when our election was going on, non-government organizations, NGOs, were scouring the campus. They actually have a booth out there. Sell us your ballot for $200. So all the students were going back to their dorm rooms and ordering absentee ballots and selling their ballots for $200. She says, this is... Okay, so there's also local boots on the ground. And you saw the movie 2,000 Mules.
Absolutely.
And so there's this sort of higher level, this is who's going to be in office, and here's the money for it. And then there's the low-level troops, and the low-level troops is the NGOs, the non-government organizations that are funneling the money, delivering the local ballots. And those NGOs make a living by writing grants. And they'll typically go like this. We're concerned about the minority neighborhood in our community. They're not registered and they don't vote. We're going to put together an effort where our goal is to get 100 people registered, and then we're going to encourage them to vote and harvest their ballot with them and blah, blah, blah. Well, what really happens is they write the grant, they get the money, and they stuff 100 ballots. That's what really happens.
And most of the time, these are nonprofit organizations,
NGOs,
right?
Yes, exactly.
Grassroots groups.
Exactly.
Right?
And I have a list of them from Pennsylvania. There are 83 of them in Pennsylvania that we have direct, hard evidence that they are doing this. They have API access, it's called. That's a technical term. They have computer access to the state voter rolls. They add someone to the voter rolls who's not a real voter, and then they stuff a ballot for that person. And we have hard evidence, that's not speculation, that that's happening. We gave that to the legislature in Pennsylvania too, by the way. Anyway, so it's the NGOs. So there's the high level those are making the who's going to be in office and providing the money. And then there's also the grassroots. And you don't have to have a huge conspiracy. You don't have to have a lot of people. You might remember, for example, that during the 2020 election, they arrested a USPS contractor, United States Postal Service contractor.
I remember that.
Driving
yes.
200,000 ballots from New York to Pennsylvania. So in other words, there's a ballot mill somewhere where 200,000 ballots were pre-prepared. They were delivered to a place in Pennsylvania, and that what would have happened is the NGOs there would have distributed them to the local election, either the drop boxes or put them in the mail and returned them as absentees. So in other words, there's this infrastructure that's at the low level as well. So when you ask about who the they are, that's the they. But then there are also individual actors. You can look this one up. Lodi, California, Lodi, Lodi, California in San Joaquin County. Okay. We were working with the team there, just like we've set up here in your state, working with the team there. And we were teaching the sheriff about the fraud that was taking place. And he was on another case. He was investigating a home gambling ring. And he walked into one of the homes of one of the city councilmen, and he noticed 70 ballots sitting there on the table. And since we had been teaching him, he's like, wait a minute, that's a problem. Well, it turns out, long story short, this city councilman was going online, looking at who's in the voter rolls who hadn't voted, and filling out ballots using those names and casting those ballots, and to ensure that would be an individual actor who was exploiting the system. So there's all kinds of levels of fraud. I mentioned the Michigan one where it jumped 156,000. That's high level machine fraud at the state level. We have local stuffing, NGOs stuffing ballots. We have individuals. So the whole system is kind of vulnerable in multiple ways. So I think I maybe gave you some theys there.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. I appreciate that, Dr. Frank.
Yeah.
So we started a revolution over a 2%, tax. What are we doing? To our listeners, if you haven't heard enough already,
yes.
How can you not want to get involved with this?
I like what Sam Adams says. He says it doesn't take a majority to prevail, just an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. That's all we need is a small minority. 3%.
That's what I've heard, 3%.
Let's get 3% of the people in Alabama informed, engaged, alert, willing to draw a line in the sand with the state, and you can take your elections back. That's all it's going to take.
It was like, if you go back in history, every time at least 3% was
Yes.
involved,
That's
we
Chris Ann Hall.
always prevailed.
Yeah, Chris Ann Hall
yeah.
did that. We did, in fact, Five Strong here in Alabama hosted me
Okay.
and Chris Ann Hall on a debate, a public debate, not a debate, I guess a public discussion.
I think that's where I saw that.
Yeah, and Chris Ann Hall, yes, exactly. 3%. All we need is 3% of your people. Come on, we can do that. Come on, let's get going. Sign up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But of course, everybody stays so busy with just keeping the bills paid.
Right.
Now, I mean, typically your elites, the ones that are controlling a lot of our elections, the one that are funding the big guys, they only care, I've noticed, about access. When you go to these, we call them access politicians, right?
Okay. Yes. Right. Yes.
When you actually get involved in these grassroots groups, and that's something I warn people about.
Yeah.
I ask people to get involved, and a lot of times people that do kind of see a clear path of how they can make a difference, they're still, man, I got a family I'm supporting.
Sure.
Most people, I mean, with inflation nowadays and the cost of everything, even people that make decent money are living paycheck to paycheck, so they have to stay so focused on that, hey, I'll let you know if I get some free time. But the ones that end up do actually sacrificing some time to get involved. That's what I've noticed, because I went through that personally. I got involved with a local grassroots group. I was looking for the candidates that we needed to support that would be willing to stick their neck out, right? Not just focus on those safe talking points. Like, they're going to talk about our compromised elections. During the pandemic, they talked about the early treatment protocols.
Right.
They talked about the V, and all that.
Yeah.
So to me, that was how we fix things, is we get behind the right candidates that are willing to do it the right way, and we support them. And even if they don't win, it's not really about winning to me. It is
about the process and education. Now, we agree.
Support the message. Right. And if you support the message and the other candidates see that people are getting behind that message.
Start the parade. They join the parade.
Yes, the other ones are forced to start talking about it now.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing I realized with Dean Odell. That's why I work with him today.
Yes.
But one of the things that discourage people is people that are in it for the right reasons. Again, the people that are the wealthy folks, that get involved. Hey, I just want, who has the best chance of winning? Yeah. You need to support this person, but how much of a chance does he have of winning? Right.
They don't want to support him unless he has
I was trying to figure out, like, do you not hear what he just said?
Yeah.
Why are you worried about how much of a chance he has of winning? It's like, oh, I see. You want to make your investment count. Yeah. You want to make sure that if you're going to donate big money, that when that person gets in office, they answer the phone. That you then have access. They serve your interest. Exactly. That's what it's about, really. Mm-hmm. So your regular people that are not wealthy folks, that are the majority,
like me, I'm not a wealthy guy.
They get involved and they see that, like I did. Yeah. And eventually it's like, guys, y'all are not here to make change. Y'all are not here to make a difference. You're here to get access to the governor's office. Yeah. You're here to get access to these politicians. And man, there's almost nothing that will just discourage you more than recognizing that reality. And to people I say that happen to watch this podcast and get involved in the grassroots group, you have to know that exists, and you have to know that you need to find a different group. If you see that, keep fighting. There is a large, massive, like you said, Dr. Frank, like we talked about, like 3%.
That's all we need.
That's all it takes.
And in Alabama, actually, we're just looking for 6 counties. But I wouldn't be a bit surprised if we got 12 before we're done, because this is a really good time. People are waking up right now. You had the Fort Deposit debacle 3 months ago. What an amazing situation. If you don't know about that, that would be a good podcast for you to do.
I did hear about that,
Yeah, where they had more ballots cast in that election than they had people.
Wasn't it 1,000 more ballots or something like that, to be exact?
Keep the numbers simple for people to remember. There were about 1,000 voters, and they had about 1,100 ballots, round numbers, just to use as a percentage. But if you think about it, that was an off election, and where the turnouts are usually just 10-20%. So really the inflation was massive. And just the other day, Andy Sorrell did an interview on that, and he talked about that, and he said half of the ballots were absentee. Ding, 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 ding. That's not normal in your state either. Typically 5 to 10% is absentee. And then half of those were notarized or witnessed by the same people. Ding, 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 ding. In other words, there's all these symptoms that there are problems with that election. And yet, what's happened? Has your media covered it? Does anybody care? Is anybody following up on it? No. So that's what we're really up against. We're really up against normal people like you and me who've been kind of conditioned out of participating. Really, our country was designed as an experiment in self-government. You and I are supposed to be the government. Each one of us is supposed to be doing our civic duty. And if all of us imagine if every one of us spent an hour a week doing something for the civic. If everybody in the country spent an hour a week, are you kidding? Think how much less government we would need because the real government would be doing the work. We've just kind of become lazy, distracted, focusing on our own issues, and we've kind of left that responsibility to someone else. But like Plato said, the penalty for refusing to get involved in politics is you end up being governed by your inferiors. And that's the situation you're in, which is why you have such crappy leadership in your state. Because you have great people, but your people aren't engaged. Your people need to re-engage. So that's what I'm here for. I'm here to get you guys to realize, hey, wait a minute, we could actually do something. I'm not just here to rain on your parade. I have a strategy going forward that is working in other places, and you're the perfect place for this strategy. I've got similar things going in other states, Colorado and Oregon. People are like, Oregon, how are you doing it there? Or California? Well, because those places the people are feeling the pain. And so they're feeling the pain, so that kind of wakes people up. And here in Alabama, I think this is a perfect time for us to expose the fraud and some of the pain is some of the obvious stuff like this Fort Deposit thing, and you have an election coming up. So there's a lot of things coming together. This is a good time for us to try this. And at the minimum, when you're in a war, it's a fifth generation war we're in, as General Flynn describes it. We're in a fifth generation war. That's another movie to add to your list, by the way. You listed movies at the beginning. That movie, Flynn, that is a stunningly good documentary. It's shocking.
Oh, wow. I don't think I've had a chance to see that yet.
Yeah, I would encourage you to see that movie. It's outstanding. But that's about lawfare against individual citizens. But we're at an ideal time right now in history for us the people to wake up and to engage. And boy, it's either now or never. Because we're in fifth generation warfare.
Hey, there you have it, folks. To all our listeners, like he said, 1 hour a week. If we could do that, if we could get 3%, please, y'all, I'm telling you, if our founding fathers were willing to sacrifice what they did to create this country, the least we could do is just put a little bit of time into this effort and focus on taking our elections back, giving our elections to the people, because as much as I regret having to say it, our elections do not belong to the people right now. So
that's correct.
We have to change that. That is the most important thing that there is. And we have to do it not for our sake, but I mean for the generation after us, because they won't have a country anymore.
I agree. And I think it honors our original covenant with God that our founders made. I mean, the whole idea was this was going to be a country that was founded upon liberty and virtue, and we've lost sight of that. So it's not just a political revival; it's also a spiritual revival. Amen. And I think those two, they go well together, because the whole idea of this country was that we were going to be a free nation, and liberty is a God-inspired idea. So
absolutely, Well, Dr. Frank, I know you have to go.
Yes.
I'm sorry we're out of time. I wish we could speak for a couple more hours. I know you have to.
I'm planning to come back to Alabama. I'd be happy to meet with you again.
Okay, can you let everybody know where they can check you out at?
Yes. So I don't have a website. They keep taking me down, so I gave up on that a few years ago. So what I did instead is I post on social media, and I've got social media accounts. You can follow the data with Dr. Frank on Rumble and on Telegram, or look for me in Douglas G. Frank on Facebook. But when you're looking for me, there's some counterfeits out there. So look for the one that's got 15, 20,000 followers, not the one that's got 200. But you'll see me there, in Douglas G. without a period on Facebook, Douglas G. Frank, with a space between each of the letters there, Douglas G. Frank, or on X, I'm there as well. Dr. Frank Models, it's called on X. Okay. And so that's the best way to follow me. I post there quite regularly. And in fact, on my YouTube channel, which is at Douglas Frank 5204, I've actually posted tons of graphs for the state of Alabama. So you can look at your own county, because I've given you a graph for your county, and you can see the inflation of your own voter rolls. Wait a minute, that's my county? Yeah, it's your county too. And that's a great resource for you. So that's the best way to track me, I think.
Excellent, excellent. And there's a way to support you. Can people donate to your cause and what you're doing?
Yeah, people can donate to me if they want, but I've deliberately kept money out of the equation here. I don't want people to think that I'm doing this for money, so I never charge for anything I do. If you want to donate to me, show up at one of my events and put $20 in my hand. Okay. That's the best way to help me. I just spoke at the Eagle Forum thing this morning. I didn't charge them anything, but they gave me a little check as thank you for being there. And so, that's how I pay for my plane tickets. And the team here in Alabama, actually, I think they took a collection and they paid for my hotel room. So,
that's great.
So I think the best way to support me is to support the team in Alabama, and then let them kind of organize me coming in. And that's probably the best way to support me. Okay. I mean, you can always mail me money. Everybody likes money. But I think the best way to support me is to support the teams here in Alabama.
So if anybody was wondering, what does it mean when they say change starts local? I think this was the best explanation for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
In this podcast.
As General Flynn says, local action for national impact.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Love it. Dr. Frank, thank you so much
to see you.
for coming on.
You're welcome.
Thank you.